Welcome to the Near Memo, a weekly conversation about search, social, and commerce. What happened, why it matters, and the implications for local. Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 104 of the Near Memo with me, Mike, and today we've got with us Tom Weddington in place of the vacationing David Mim, who seems to go on certainly more vacations or more trips than I do. At any rate, so Tom is a local SEO extraordinaire, local services expert, and has been graciously willing to sub in at the last minute here for us. And so we're excited to have you. Welcome, Tom.
Thanks, Greg.
So today we're going to talk about, as always, we talk about search, social, and commerce sort of through a local lens. And today, we can't stop talking about Chat GPT. Nobody else can. There's a lot of really interesting stuff going on still and probably for the foreseeable future. We're going to be talking about local services ads. There was a kind of a milestone reached, I guess, this week with the addition of new verticals. Also, I'm going to talk about how ChatGPT is impacting the local listing space. And then Mike wants to talk about AI and content creation, SEO, and so on and so forth, and transparency. So with that, I want to turn it over to you, Tom, to kind of lead us in with the LSA item. So what's going on?
Okay. Yeah, I just thought we'd talk about, Mike had shared the article that was posted on Google's small business blog just a couple days ago, just talking about more of the recent categories that they've added. Some of these have actually been around a little while, but have been pretty under the radar. I think probably the biggest one that is really newish is dental. So It's obviously a big one. There are some eye-opening ones on there. If you hadn't seen, like with the funeral services, weight loss, personal trainer.
Do you think Google will guarantee the funeral services? 2,000. If you're not happy with your funeral, get your money back.
Yeah, that's kind of it.
Well, what about weight loss? If you don't lose enough weight, you're going to get your money back?
Yeah. And of course, these are the Google screened categories, so they're not going to be doing any
There's no guarantee. Yeah,
no guarantees on these. But yeah, it shows that Google is going to continue pushing these out. They're continuing to expand. They did go through a phase of where things were on hold, and of course COVID kind of changed, put a hold to a lot of this, but they're back into expanding, going into different verticals beyond the home services and beyond legal. Getting into medical is a pretty big item. So going into dental and then acupuncture and some of these others, I anticipate we'll see even more expansion into medical in the future. But, we actually helped an acupuncturist, it was about a year ago, start to get into to LSA, and it was very under the radar at the time. And also back then, if you were the only person or the only company in your area, your ad wouldn't show. Soon after, they actually started on mobile because they can't display one unit on desktop.
Right.
But they did start allowing that on mobile. So if you're the only business in your category in your area, once you're approved in LSA, you actually can have your ad show, even if there's no competition. Only on mobile, again, because on desktop they don't have a way of showing just the single unit. But so you might search on desktop and say, okay, well, there's no one in say acupuncture in my area. But if you look on mobile, you might see one. So there could potentially be some ad or an ad showing in your area, but if you're checking on desktop, you might not see it.
In these non-guaranteed areas, what are the qualifications to get in, and what are the benefits of getting in, and what is the ROI in an area like that where you're the first one?
Yeah, I think it's certainly good to get in first because of the lack of competition and just kind of getting the leg up on everybody. Your placement's going to be great. You're going to be at the top of the results. You're still seeing the ad unit above everything, including just the standard Google Ads. Screening process, it's going to vary a bit from one category to another, but you're looking at background checks on the business and potentially the business owner. And in some of these, what they call field workers, but a lot of these with the Google screen, it's really just making sure the business is background checked and the business owner.
And Tom, that's all outsourced, right? All the verification, the checking, validating of the licenses and so on and so forth. That's all done by a third party, subcontracting to Google, right?
Yeah, they have a couple different partners. I believe they're still working with to do some of the background checks individually. But another thing I was going to mention too, if you go, this would be called like what I'd call the local services finder. If you go to google.com/local services/pro list, that's a good way to get an idea. It basically just brings up a default, very simple page of category and your location, and it'll auto-populate a drop-down list. So you'll see what these categories are, and you can change their location. So you can potentially see. So I found like in Denver, there are some companies that are in funeral services, or if you search cremation service Denver, so you can utilize that to try to find what's available, and are there any companies in these areas yet? Because a lot of places, of course, there's nothing. But going to that URL, google.com.
What was that URL again, Tom?
Google.com/local services/pro list. So that's kind of the local finder.
We'll post the URL. We'll post the URL with the transcript.
And so for these non-competitive or new categories, how expensive is it to do an ad?
It's going to vary from one to another. I think the acupuncture that we've worked with or that we helped get set up, I think it's $14 per lead. But of course, some of these verticals, you can get up to 150, 200. So it really varies depending on what category you're in.
And refresh our memory of what Google considers a lead: a call, a booking, a message.
Yeah, the phone call is over 30 seconds. They also offer messaging leads. And I believe messaging leads are still half the price of the call leads. And some verticals have booking leads, but it's mainly the phone call and the messaging leads that most of these verticals will see. But there is some booking integration, kind of like the Reserve with Google type of interface that some verticals have, where you can actually see the calendar of availability and book a service through there.
So you think do you have a guess as to which categories they'll be getting into next? Or do you think will it go to bricks and mortar, or will it stay strictly a service type business project?
Yeah, well, a lot of these new ones, with the dentist, you're looking at a lot of the more brick and mortar type, and with the Google screen and actually having the physical address showing on the ad. If you go into it, if you click on the ad, you can see a little more information and physical location, where on the home services side, it's really just, I don't think there's a lot of people drilling down to that level. It's just, you need someone to come out to your place. So you're clicking on it to message or call directly from there.
So home services, home construction, lawyers, now dentists. This is interesting because it's the same categories that they're targeting with the new review filter. These sort of not work at home, although some of them are work at home professionals are getting heavily targeted with the new review filter. It's interesting. Those are the same ones they're charging. So we're seeing reports in Twitter of a lot of spam, both reviews. I'm seeing some cases of review spam coming from LSA, very difficult, no reporting mechanism that's obvious. And also I'm seeing accounts of just listing spam. If they're validating these locations, how does somebody get validated?
Yeah, I don't think they've ever been good on the location validation side. In the past, a lot of people have said, this is kind of an answer to abuse in maps. If that's the case, then there would be some focus on the legitimacy of the location. Now, with the brick and mortars, there may not be as much. Within legal, there's been a lot of abuse with lawyers and just getting offices in various areas. But I think with a lot of these new categories, I don't think there will be that extent of abuse. In garage door, it's really bad, uh, and personal injury lawyers. But I think there's a pretty good amount of categories where there's not this excessive abuse. Although I think you've worked with a company that's getting the review abuse. It's not a garage door and it's not a lawyer, correct? They're getting
Right.
hit with a lot of.
It's HVAC getting, and they're not getting a ton of them. They're getting more regular reviews that are fake, and Google's taking those down fairly quickly. But it's the LSA reviews that are, there's no easy mechanism to report, and they're not getting taken down at all, as far as I can tell.
I found the link just very recently because I know exchanged with you before about it, and I think this might be pretty new, and it's in an actual form specific to disputing reviews on LSA, and it has fields that are beyond kind of the just two field form. It has a lot more details to it.
Oh, great! We'll share that too.
This is pretty new, so I'll share you a link with that. So hopefully they're becoming aware that this is a problem and they need to do something about it because, you've got a mix of they're hitting their business profile and their LSA, right, with a mix of these negative reviews.
Ultimately, I think somebody's going to come after him for it because, I've written about this a whole bunch of times where Google doesn't have any liability for review fraud or fake listings in the normal sphere. The presence of Google Screened and Google Guarantee creates a kind of representation about the accuracy of the listing, even though Google may not intend that, and they have some CYA disclaimers here and there. I think that's a danger for them. So I think that they'll wake up to that and eventually try and do more, at least to show a good faith effort to address it. That's probably the best we're going to get from them is this sort of good faith. Hey, we've got a forum. We're publicizing these, this sort of recourse. I want to sort of explore one more thing. We're running a little bit long on this segment, but I want to explore one more thing before we move on to myself, which is the performance that you've seen historically, Tom, with these ads. I mean, my operating assumption is Google would not be growing these categories if these ads weren't performing pretty well. So what is your sense of performance, if you can generalize?
Yeah. Of course, there's a lot of categories and areas. I'm more familiar with home services verticals, specifically HVAC and plumbing and electrical. But I mean, performance is, and it varies. I mean, there are some that struggle to get leads, and some businesses get a lot of leads. And one thing that and maybe I'll write about at some point before too long is just seeing the change in cost per lead. In some places, it's gone up dramatically, like well over 100%. Some cases, 200%. From years ago, it was a flat rate. Like, this is how much a lead cost in this city.
Right. That was initially that's how they launched it. And that was one of the things that was most appealing about it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Flat rate. It's still flat rate. It's just a high flat rate.
Yeah.
There's no bidding. Google just says, oh, let's crank that one up. All right. So it's not a bidding system. It's just an arbitrary system, or not?
Well, it was initially. And then they changed it. And it was around the time when they came out with the Google Screen for lawyers. About that same time, they released the bidding option. So then you do get to that point where you're not paying a flat rate. And, we've seen some go from, like a plumber that was paying $24 per lead now is paying close to $80. Now that's maybe not typical, but I know we've seen that in some markets, and some it's more like, it's about twice as much as it was or a little over. But the cost per lead has gone up. But in most cases, it's still a good cost per lead. And these businesses, I think, would be, happy to pay it.
Any sense of how it compares with conventional Google ads in terms of efficacy, cost? I mean, I know it's a little bit of an apples to oranges comparison because you're paying on a click versus paying on a lead, quote unquote. But do you have any sense of that at all?
Yeah, I mean, as the costs are increasing, but I think it's still, if it's down to, if you're a business and you've got the capacity and you've got the lead flow through LSA, I think you want to maximize that. So if you're having to turn anything down, it's probably going to be the pay-per-click. We still try to, allocate most of the budget to LSA. I've heard some people say, "Oh, LSA leads it's not as good quality." I think it is. I mean, this may depend on vertical, but I think it is good quality. I think maybe they're just, they're listening to the phone calls on LSA, and maybe they would never listen to phone calls from their pay-per-click, so they don't realize that it is comparable, and they're maybe scrutinizing a little bit more.
For sure, when they get charged on the basis of a 30-second phone call, that's what happens when you do a pay-per-call kind of thing. Is that people start listening to those calls to determine the quality of leads. Well, so any sort of last pieces of advice before we move on here, and we'll definitely sort of have you back, and we can talk about this topic more in the future.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, if any type of business, Google does not do a very great job of putting this out there. I mean, even that blog post from a couple of days ago, some of these verticals have been around for quite a while. I think they've relied on some of the LSA partners trying to get the word out and seeing if, do you have clients, because that's how they've been with us. Do you guys have clients that are in these verticals? That we're going to be launching these verticals, but then they launch and there's no real announcement other than, the post the other day, but most businesses are not going to see that. So, actively look at that link with the pro list, because it's going to be in your favor to get involved in these early, be one of the first ones in there. You just can't be, if you get in there early and start getting lead flow, don't think it's going to continue, because it's going to get more competitive over time. So don't ever rely fully on these leads, but take advantage of them while you can. So keep an eye out for more expansion in, possibly medical, and as we've seen with preschool and funerals. I mean, anything could be an open game in the future.
Thanks for joining David, Mike, and Greg. To stay on top of the latest developments in local, subscribe to our newsletter at nearmedia.co. We'll see you next week.